I think when you start to realise that your parents can be wrong about things,
Yeah.
you kind of get addicted to the idea that they are wrong and that you're right. so you just sort of throw out everything your parents believe because my parents are just some stupid people who raised me. They don't actually know anything. And then getting past adolescence into adulthood is a sort of process of going through all of that stuff you threw in the bin and trying to pick out the parts that you actually need now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Women's Hour. Today we have a very special guest with us, my own mother. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. And I wanted to invite you on because you had very strong feelings about the show Woman's Hour on Radio 4, made by the BBC.
That's true.
What you could call the predecessor and rival of Women's Hour.
That is, yes.
So for some people who may not know what Woman's Hour is, would you like to give a quick introduction to it and then maybe talk about your relationship to that show?
Okay, yes. Well, I was pretty scandalised when I heard that you were going to call your show Woman's Hour, because Woman's Hour is a very much loved BBC programme on Radio 4, which has existed for about, since 1950s, I think. And whereas most of Radio 4 was geared for men, or for both, but this was a specific hour in the morning when, it was just run by women presenters, which was quite unusual in those days, for women to listen to. And I love that show very much. I mean, that show made me who I am, really. So
it's on every day still on Radio 4. They have a daily Women's Hour, I believe. Sorry, Woman's Hour. I keep saying that wrong.
Yeah. Yes, Woman's Hour. But I don't listen anymore because I don't really listen to radio. I used to listen to radio because my mum turned the TV off all summer and said we shouldn't watch any more TV. We should sit in the garden. So I'd sit in the garden and listen to radio.
And could you talk about what you mean by it making you the person you are now? What do you mean by that?
Well, we always had Radio 4 on. I guess it might even have affected the way I speak. It's certainly affected all my middle class sort of way of thinking. The show was always, all of Radio 4 was actually very formulaic, and I think it probably still is, but they have changed things quite a bit. So you'd have the certain shows coming on every week at the same time, and they were all really good. Some of the comedies are really funny and topical.
How did it change you as a person, though? What did you learn or think about listening to that show?
So Women's Hour was, they'd get these speakers in, a bit like you, I suppose, but they were speakers of national import.
Authors and things.
Yeah, people who've done things. It's funny, I can't really put my finger on many things. I remember they had one about shaving, whether you should shave or not, and all these things that get sold to women. And I started thinking that a lot of it was commercial nonsense, really. That things we're told in the shops and the things that are sold to women are just, we're marketed to quite a lot. People are very vulnerable to being told they've got to buy lots of skin creams and things, building on their insecurities.
Yeah, in economics, I think they call that like an artificial demand, or a demand that's been invented. There are demands for things that you actually need, and then there's a sort of new category of things that you never had before, but that you might want.
Solutions to problems.
Supply,
problems that you didn't know you had.
I believe the economic term is supply creates its own demand. Right. So once you start to make something, people will start to want it.
But really they had, I suppose it was role models. They had women leaders from across various different sectors. I mean, for instance, when I was young, there was a lot of terrorism in Northern Ireland, and there was the struggles there. And they have peace campaigners and things. Women from all walks of life. Yeah. I mean, as I say, I can't remember it very well because it was a long time ago. I used to listen when I was young, 16. But the things you listen to when you're 16, and 14 to 16, that's what really makes you who you are, aren't they? They say you read the best books in life. when you're that age.
I think you remember them the best at that age as well, even
Yes.
if you don't remember them later exactly. But
Yeah. And so then later I did get into Cambridge, and no one from my school was really interested in going to Cambridge or anything like that. And I think it was... I kind of had my own culture. I mean, it's like my peers were not the people in my class. My peers were the people on Women's Hour, and Jenny Murray and those, they were my role models. Yeah, so it really can powerfully affect you, that sort of thing.
and you went to Cambridge to be a academic, a scholar, a woman who goes places and observes things.
Yes, well, my aspirations weren't very high. I was mostly going to Cambridge to escape. I think lots of children just go to university to escape their surroundings, go somewhere completely different and be exposed, get some training so that you can get a professional job. So I studied history, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, trained as a teacher, and took it from there.
Okay. Is that what you wanted to do when you were a wide-eyed listener of Women's Hour? Sorry if it's getting too personal, but I am interested.
Yes, that's true.
We never talked about this before, really.
No,
so.
we haven't really. Because, yes, it's really funny. When you're young, you can't ever imagine escaping from the place where you're brought up. And then everyone does. I mean, most people do.
I never did.
Like hell on earth. No, hell on earth. Stuck in the place you're brought up with your parents. It's true you didn't.
I did briefly. I didn't quite reach the escape velocity.
Or at least you saw what was out there, didn't you?
I certainly did, yes. I feel like I've seen everything the world has to offer, and that's why I could safely come home to start my life at home.
Conquered your own environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're very glad you did.
But what about you? When you were 16, 18, when you were at Cambridge, what did you imagine your life would look like?
Well, I very much wanted to get married, but I remember there was all these things like the joy of sex and things, and they were all men with beards, and I couldn't ever be imagine being married to someone with a beard.
Was that the 70s?
Yes, it was. Who was kind of like that. But yeah, I wanted to have my own children, and I couldn't. It was really very difficult to imagine what the future would be like.
You're taking it day by day?
Taking it day by day and escaping into books, really. Escaping was the big thing. So escaping to Woman's Hour, but escaping to books. And yeah, there were other programmes on the radio too. There was one called Down Your Way, where a guy travelled all around Britain, and I loved travelling around Britain with my dad. He had different factories in different parts of England. And I knew much more about England than my friends.
Yeah, sounds very interesting.
I've always loved England.
Yeah.
And the BBC is something very English as well. But you're very English too, so carrying the torch.
I do sometimes listen to the radio, or I listen to the BBC Radio 2 I've got on often. Yeah. I get sick of listening to the audiobooks in my car.
Well, what's good about you is that you're one-woman show. That's a strength and a weakness, really, because you're very much yourself. You're completely in charge of your own environment, but you're not working on a national or international scale, really.
Well, I'd like to. I've got to start small.
Yes.
You have to just... that's kind of why I started YouTube, is because you don't really get anywhere if you just sit around and wait for someone to invite you. You sort of just have to start doing things and hope somebody notices,
That's
really.
True, but you could send in some tapes or something.
I could write a book, or I suppose.
You could get journalism training.
I wanted to be an actor when I was very, very young. I quickly grew out of that, I think. Mostly just because it looked like fun. being an actor, but apart from starting YouTube, I've never actually wanted to be a producer or a broadcaster or anything. Just sort of fell into that with YouTube.
This is something you can do in your own spare time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not. It's a hobby, not a profession that I'd like to really go into. But we don't want to hear about me. They hear about me every week. I wanted to ask you about something you said to me recently. I know you think I don't listen, but I am listening. You said something about having balance in life, about these days it gets called work-life balance, but I think when you talk about it, it's not just work, it's more like aspirations, more like artistic endeavours and having an intellectual life outside of your home.
It does. I always had these two dreams. I'd have one nightmare that I had lots of dying rabbits, and then I'd have another nightmare that I was trying to teach a lesson and I couldn't find the classroom.
Yeah.
And one that's very much like the sort of dream that young people have when they dream about not being able to get into an exam or something. I think that dream morphed into the later one.
Yes. I always dream that I'm late.
I always saw those two dreams as being torn in two in a way, and trying to get the balance right. So if my career was going well, then I'd worry about my children, and vice versa.
Is there someone or multiple people who you look to who you think have achieved this balance properly, or is it always a struggle?
I don't know. I do have my heroines, but I don't really know how they manage their work-life balance. There's a theologian called Elaine Storkey. I'm very fond of her. She's actually married to quite a famous male theologian called Alan Storkey, so
She's
got
married.
a successful marriage. Actually, yes. We had a church course recently about marriage, and they looked at all different types of relationships, same-sex relationships and different types, and then they had her as an example of the straight relationship. So I thought that was pleased. I was glad to see her. She was a lot older now.
And in your personal opinion, without getting too personal if you don't like to, how do you think that balance or being torn two different ways has shaken out in your life?
Oh, yes. Well, I don't think I'm a career disaster, really. I did get to work in London, which was a sort of rite of passage. I'd always wanted to go and work in the city for a bit.
In the British Library, is it?
Yeah, no, I just wrote my own book in the British Library.
Okay.
But I worked in libraries. I worked in the City University London Library, and I worked for a law firm as well.
Sorry, I only bring up the British Library
briefly,
because it's such an amazing library
I
that
know,
I think
that
anyone
was-
would fall in love with,
That
would want to
was
be a
one of the
librarian.
highlights of my career, was sitting in the British Library writing a book for my own devices, really. I did consider that, having made it. Because when I was in the second year at university studying history, in the summer we had to do a dissertation, so I went to the British Library as it was then, which was an most amazing establishment, and it was in Bloomsbury, and at lunchtime I'd go out and sit in the square, little grassy square, and see all these people, and I think, I'd really love to live in Bloomsbury and be one of these Bloomsbury people who works here and studies all these things. And
Yeah.
so
I don't know if you've read, this is really going off topic, but have you read Flowers for Algernon?
no, I don't think so. Is that the one you told me about, a woman who's... No, all right. tell
There's
me.
no woman in it. Stop right there. That's the one about the guy. He's a very poor guy, works in a bakery, and he's has a mental disability, but we'd call it these days. He gets entered into a scientific experiment where he's given some kind of unspecified treatment that increases his intelligence.
Oh.
And it's the entire book is just his diary.
I thought it was a woman. But yes.
He gives his own words, with spelling mistakes at the beginning, and it's very endearing.
Yes,
this very
you did
simple
tell me
fellow, and he gets
Yes.
smarter and smarter. And what's interesting is that when he's halfway through his transformation, he becomes this sort of young, enthusiastic learner, and he loves to see all these people out on the quad,
Yes.
on
Yes,
campus,
same
and he's
thing, yeah.
admiring all these intellectuals and all the conversations they must be having. They're so enriching, and and then as he gets to the end, he's getting too smart for these people, and they all become so tiresome. And he sees how pretentious they are, and I think I was similarly disillusioned where I used to admire university students and scholars and academics until I actually entered that world, and they're not really any smarter or more interesting than the people I knew
Well,
before.
that was interesting, actually, because when I went to study librarianship in University College London, I was actually really intimidated by those people, and I'd been to Cambridge, and at Cambridge I wasn't particularly impressed. There were a few people who were really brilliant, and
There always
lots
are,
of people who worked hard and had very good memories, so they had good brains, but they weren't necessarily creative people, and they all mixed together, so they rubbed off on each other. But these people I met were foreign students who'd come to London to study, so they were like the cream of the crop from their different countries, and they were brilliant and very intimidating, the librarians, because you have to have a different degree before you're a librarian is a sort of third degree. And many people in Germany have to study degrees for 5 years and things, like doctors.
I guess what I was trying to get at, thinking about it, is that I think a lot of people have this aspiration, not just for a career, but they also imagine having this rich intellectual life of having friends to
That's
have
true,
deep
yes.
conversations with. And I really do wonder how many people have, get that out of their work or out of their education. The only place I've been able to find that is with my husband, talking with our parents. And
I often thought that the meals that we used to have, the conversations around our dinner table, when you were all, somewhere between 5 and 25 actually, or 30. But those when you were all 30 and your brother had been studying at Oxford and
it doesn't get much better than our family
and
dinners.
your father
I think.
with PhD
Yes.
and things.
No, they're a very smart family, I think, and I really think that this romantic idea it's a great aspiration for young people to have as sort of like a belief in Father Christmas. Like I wouldn't like to squash this belief in anyone who's hoping to go to university or to pursue something intellectual, but I think it is really not overrated.
We could
but
have
it's
the Father Christmas debate names.
it's I think
Yeah.
people often are
I
disappointed
think
when
that's
they
right.
get there
I think
and they
I
find
was,
that
really, actually.
I go to work and there's they're smart people. I work with very smart
It's
people.
what you make of it, though, as well, I think.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what
yeah,
they
exactly.
say.
I think, and what I was going to say is not just our family. We get very interesting conversations out of each other, but also just doing
friends.
Women's Hour and inviting just any old random bimbos on. And we had some very interesting conversations that way.
Goodness. You can't say bimbos, Polly, in Radio 4 world. You see, that's why...
That's why we're on Women's Hour with an E.
This is the border between us.
Oh, yeah, well, there's a lot of things we say on Women's Hour that you can't say on Radio 4, I'm afraid. I guess I wanted to ask you, I don't think it's really possible to have it all in life, to talk about dreams getting squashed. And I think to get the most out of life, it would be better to single-mindedly dedicate yourself to one thing. Like your family.
Everyone says that. Like City Slickers. One thing.
I haven't seen that. But go on.
Well, in City Slickers, the guy says, the secret. In fact, I discovered the secret of life, and it's one thing, and then he dies. And then the other guy is
Just one thing. Oh.
Yes.
I do remember that now. I think you've told me that before. We've already had this whole conversation.
Find your niche.
Yeah, I think that when you try to do too many things, you split yourself up, and you can't. You can only do one thing well. I don't know if that's an expression.
That's what everyone says to me, because they say I'm a bit all over the place.
You're a bit scattered.
Yeah, and I've always thought that as a Cambridge person, and my Cambridge friends are kind of like Renaissance man. You know the concept of Renaissance
polymath.
man? Yeah, polymath. I've always thought you should be a polymath. But
It takes a very special kind of.
Yeah.
It takes a very special kind of person to be a polymath.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think.
have the brain for it really.
Not
but
everyone
I am
is.
very interested in lots of things. And
Yeah.
I think that's the way to be, and you can talk a little bit about everything to everyone. But I did manage to have a career in the end, and for a long time as a librarian for a very good institution indeed, and I was very proud of that job.
I'm glad.
So I was in a good company, but my role wasn't very exciting. And in the end, that came to an end because that role didn't continue. So.
Well, you raised, if I may speak for myself, you raised 3 very productive, interesting, well-rounded
exactly.
children, I think.
That's what I'm very proud of. Very proud of. And grandchildren.
And now you have grandchildren. I think that there's not many people. It seems to me that when you have a few children, there's like at least one who doesn't really end up the way you expected.
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd say to that, but I think it's rare to have 3 out of 3 be such well-adjusted, wonderful
lovely.
people,
And nice.
such as myself.
Everyone's nice to each other as well, which is very amazing
Yeah, we get on, don't we?
at the moment.
Yes.
You can wait a few deaths and
Yeah. We'll see how it shakes out.
bequeathings and things. And, yeah, people fall out when they're older.
There's lots of ways that family can
But
mess
we've
itself
made
up.
it so far.
So far, I think we're doing okay. We'll see if we can get to the end of this episode without getting in pulling each other's hair out. I spoke about you on an episode of Women's Hour 2 episodes ago, where I don't know when this is going to be uploaded, but it was recently for me. We were talking about what exactly is Women's Hour for, and I mentioned how I believe I was raised. I don't want to misrepresent you, so I'm giving you the opportunity to defend yourself now.
Yes.
I said in that episode that I believe you tried to raise me with the same principles, by the same standards as my two brothers who were older than me, without giving any of us any special lessons or any rules that were not applied to the others. It was all very egalitarian.
Any rules at all?
Or any rules at all, indeed. And I think, obviously I don't know what other upbringings were like, or what indeed your upbringing was like, but getting to adolescence, when I started to become more of an adult, although I didn't realise at the time, looking back at it now, it feels like I was quite lacking in a lot of social skills, a lot of things, just basically how to dress myself, how to like wash myself, things that...
Well, yeah, I didn't think I had a lot of those things either. You get that sort of thing from your mother, really, and my mother had them, but she didn't sort of manage to pass them on to me. So in some ways.
Maybe she should be on the show.
A bit dyspraxic, because I am a bit dyspraxic. I mean, I wouldn't read your school notes, really. Your dad would get them in your lunchbox.
Yeah, I was
lunchbox.
I was late for a lot of things when I was that age.
Things, and that was my fault.
Yeah,
really.
I was missing a lot of... I would never have my PE kit or have my homework. You never checked that my homework was done, or that I had the right things to take to school. Yeah, you let us make our own mistakes so that we could learn from them the hard way.
Wow,
and that is one way of, I was very thankful at the time for my freedom, but sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if I hadn't learnt things so much the hard way.
Yeah, well, I was very distracted when you were young.
Yeah.
I was having a lot of mental rearrangements going on in my head.
I think you're a wonderful mother, and you taught me a lot of things that I really value. And what I said in that episode is that you gave me a love of reading and a love of music, which are really wonderful things to take in throughout childhood and then also into adulthood, and things that I can pass on to my own daughters. But
that's very nice.
What I would like to do for my daughters is to try and, I think every generation tries to remedy the mistakes that they feel were passed on to them.
Yes, that's right. I think if you want your children to be really good at one thing, I think it's the parents usually. You have to start them young, and it's usually the parents who decide what their children's going to be good at.
Maybe.
And, like Tiger Woods, coach them from a young age.
Yeah, that's one school of thought that I think
those
Tiger
parents
Woods
get very criticised, don't they, if they're too
yeah,
full on.
Yeah. Well, I never wanted to be an opera singer, or I ended up being very good at maths and science, which is something you never tried to teach me.
No. Perhaps that's why you escaped into maths and science, an area which
I was just good at it.
I would never darken your door there.
Well, you're the one who told me to study engineering, because at that time I didn't know if I wanted to try and make it as an artist or an illustrator. I was really into drawing, and still am, and I was sort of looking at these different degrees that I could study for. And I said, I think I might like to do engineering, because I was really into sci-fi at the time. People asked me why I became engineer, and I was really into reading Isaac Asimov and other sort of science fiction stories and robots and machines and things. I really loved those things, and I was good at science and physics and maths.
You had a very good teacher, didn't you?
Yes, true. And so I loved those things, but I also loved doing drawings and the fictional side of science fiction as well. And I asked you if I should study illustration and or engineering. You're like, are you kidding? Do engineering? Like, that's a proper job. You look on your face. It was like you never imagined that you might have a child who might want to study engineering.
Well, no, that's right. Because when I was young, engineering wasn't really a thing, especially not for women. I mean, they're always going on about women engineers now, and you're kind of the product of that going on. And I know you think that's kind of positive discrimination or something.
Yeah.
But really, when I was young, we'd never even heard of engineering. We never did engineering. I went to Cambridge to do history. And it was while it was Cambridge that I realised that everyone in Cambridge is absolutely crazy about engineers. And they're all desperate for engineers. And, the whole university kind of... They're the gods of the university as the engineers.
Yeah, it is funny. People don't really think about how things get made. They think about, like, oh, well, someone had an idea to invent a smartphone or a calculator, and then they go, like, well, what we call engineering is the bit between, like, the idea and actually getting it into people's hands.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not very sure myself, you see.
Well, it could be any. I mean, software engineering gets talked about a lot now, and
Yeah.
engineer really just means any kind of tech-based product.
Well, I
Let's
did
be
tell my
honest.
brother he should be an engineer as well.
Oh,
But
yeah?
He didn't get the results for it, so he's a nurse.
Well, neither did I,
He's
but
a very good nurse.
I managed to
Well,
wing it anyway.
You did. Yeah, well, you're good at winging things, aren't you, actually? you winged the school orchestra trip to Barcelona instead of your placement
I
at
did.
Imperial College.
Yeah, I don't think I ever told that story of how I ended up in the school band on a much lower qualification than I needed to be there. You know the story, don't you?
Oh, of course I do, yes. I told someone the other day. You're the only one in the family who wings it.
You know what? I thinking back on that story now, I think maybe I was a lot better at the flute than I thought I was at the time, because when I met people who were who had higher grades than me at the
Yes.
flute, they weren't as good at sight reading as I was.
Oh, right.
So maybe in that
So
sight
you were in
reading,
the choir as well.
yeah, they gave me a sight reading exam for the
Well,
band.
there you are then.
And I thought I did quite badly, but actually maybe I was just holding my... You don't really
This
see
is
other
the
people.
Cinderella complex.
Maybe I was holding myself to too high a standard, because
Yeah.
other people are pretty hopeless at high. Some musicians, they're very good musicians, they'll go like, what, you can play something you've never heard? Like, that's a magic power. Like, oh, you play the notes and you play them for the duration that it says in the musical notation, and that's how you play music, in my opinion. Anyway, so I wasn't supposed to...
Yes.
I didn't have the
Yes.
qualifications
Yeah,
to be
you
in the
were
band,
good.
but I went to the audition to be in the band, and they thought I was already in the band and that I was just auditioning for my seat. So they let me stay, even though I didn't even nearly have the right grade to be there. I hope I was an asset to that band and not playing too flat or too out of time.
Yeah, well, I'm always hoping that when your daughter's big, we can all be in the band together, maybe, or certainly. I'm
Yeah.
intending to take her along to some bands, but at the moment I'm not banding my euphonium.
Yeah. Well, what I was trying to get at earlier was just saying that for my daughters, I'd like to, I think, help them be... To say that I want them to be confident kind of is a bit of a euphemism, I suppose, because I want them to have rightfully earned confidence in
Yes.
themselves, not just in their wonderful brains and their wonderful personalities, but also to help them with, how do you conduct yourself with friends or with boys who are showing interest in you, or
Yeah.
all this stuff that is really difficult for teenagers. And I know it changes, it's always changing, and people always roll their eyes at their parents' advice because it's so old-fashioned.
There's a really good psychologist who Facebook keep giving me, called Bruce something, I don't know what he's called. He gives you advice on all those sort of things.
Yeah.
Why are you slightly weird? There are very specific 5 reasons why you might be very specifically weird and not realise it. They're very good. I like them.
I often get into this sort of self-conscious mode where, I don't know if you've had this happen, where you're in a social interaction and you say something just a bit off and you can feel the atmosphere change, like you
Yes.
said something wrong,
Yes.
you made a joke that didn't land, and it
Yes.
feels like you've just been thrown
Yes.
you've been thrown into the centre of a courtyard and people are about to throw stones at you or something. And we talked before about whether I have autism or not, but sometimes it feels like I've really just misread the room completely, and maybe that's just something that
I think you're better than me. I'm worse at that than you.
yeah, well, maybe that's not something you can teach except through experience to properly socialise someone.
But yes, but I did sort of dump you in society and trying to make sure you were exposed to lots of people who talked to
Yeah. Well, you did. You didn't put us in a room with a DVD when you had a dinner party. You let us talk to your friends as if we were adults and just sort of.
Oh, that's right. You were very cool with our friends.
Instead of patting me on the head and saying say hello, everybody.
Children
Now,
should be seen and
go
not
away.
heard.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's one of the benefits of letting someone fail is to, even to put them in a social situation where it could be embarrassing for them to fail. It takes a lot of bravery to let someone make a fool of themselves like that when it's your own child, I think.
I think the difference between parenting, the thing about parenting really is you want to watch your own children. You want as much input in. I mean, everyone does, I think. To be a good parent, you have to have as much input as you can into the bringing up of your child, and financially, it's a payoff between finances. Really, it's not so much career; it's the finances. You have to be prepared to live on quite a low income if you're going to bring up your children totally yourself, and then you do miss intellectual company a bit as well.
Yeah, I guess that's...
So we were prepared to accept a much lower income than many of our peers, really. That's why you said, oh, why do we never have any toys in our house ever?
Yeah, well, I remember having a lot of second-hand toys. And
well, I don't think your brothers had any, because I didn't have the networks in those days.
I remember we used to have a black and white TV. That wasn't the only TV in the house, but we did at one point have 2 TVs. But having a black and white TV ever makes it sound like I'm...
Well, that was the principle, because we are Christians and we have this... We're trying to be countercultural, your dad and me. That's our philosophy.
No. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, having a black and white TV or otherwise. And we never had any extra channels. We had the 4 terrestrial channels and Channel 5 for pretty much mine until I moved out of the house, I think. Oh no, because then there was Freeview, and then there was hundreds of channels after that everyone could have for free. But like you said, I
remember going into the supermarket and seeing this HGTV, John Wayne, and I was just thinking, oh my goodness, and it's just so different from what we've got. I did sort of feel a pang of lust at that point, and it wasn't for John Wayne. Perhaps it was for all those wide countryside.
I think the thing about having a higher standard of living like that, that there's a standard. I think that they've actually showed this with studies, that there's a bar above which, if you're living in poverty and you don't know where you're going to be paying your bills from, or buying food with, that can cause a lot of anxiety. Exactly. We never lived like that.
We were very lucky to be able to live like that.
But above that, the amount of income that someone makes, where they spend it, it doesn't actually make any difference at all to their mood, their like self-reported happiness. And so I think it's no bad thing at all to live frugally if you need to, or if you'd rather save for something
we were buying
in the future.
House as well.
Yeah, for paying off a house, and I think when it comes, I think having 3 children as well as it does add up.
No, we never. That never seemed a problem.
You never worried about money?
No, we were very lucky. Your dad always had a good job as a teacher, and so we didn't have to worry about money. They say you're only 3 paychecks away from being evicted.
You know what I heard recently that I thought was a good rule? They said you can't afford something if you can't pay for it 3 times out of what you have in your bank account right now.
Right.
So
that was another thing. Yeah.
That's the rule of thumb. Like you can say,
we never buy anything that we couldn't pay off straight away.
Yeah, well, of course. But he's saying that if you, if you have, I don't even want to say what would be a normal amount to have in your account. If you have £500 in your account, then you could technically afford something that costs £500, but you wouldn't really say I can afford that. You wouldn't spend £500 if that's all you had left.
Yes.
But if you have £1,500, you might start to think,
well, that's right,
I can afford something that costs £500.
Yes, that's right. And that's quite a good rule of thumb. That is kind of how I work. I mostly work by rule of thumb. And then I borrow from my dad.
Yeah.
When I've overspent. So that's not a very feminist thing. Oh, yeah, so what I was going to say, the Cinderella complex, that was the thing I learnt from...
was that imposter syndrome, or was that different?
Yes. Oh, yes, that is... Yes. That's right, imposter syndrome. There was a psychologist called Susie Orbach, and she was famous for a book called Fat is a Feminist Issue.
When was that written?
Well, that was probably in the late 70s, yes. And then she wrote another book called What Women Want, which basically looked at why marriages weren't working out, and it said they wanted someone who was like their mother. Actually, they wanted someone to be a mother to them.
The men did.
Yeah, and then the Cinderella issue is they want some bloke to be like Prince Charming and pay everything for them. So they're the 2 different things, really. One is some guy that just gives you everything, and another is, I guess mothers give you undivided attention and 100% approval, but I don't know if I gave you those things.
I think judgment... From a male perspective, being judged by women feels very bad, because it's that's almost the currency for male achievement, is whether women are looking your way or if they're disgusted by you. That's that can really hit a man's confidence, I believe.
Right. Oh,
Not that I understand men a lot, but I think that obviously there's lots of ways that a married couple can make each other miserable. But I think
there are.
undeserved judgment is something that really hurts someone's confidence. But maybe especially men's, where I think if you can tell your husband that he's done something well and that you're proud of him, that makes most men very happy. Not like a mother patting him on the head, but just to say that you're genuinely grateful
if they genuinely
for something.
do something good.
Yeah. Not to be condescending. Although actually, as a mother, I don't believe in being overly giving undeserved praise anyway. I try to be kind of... I'm not very condescending by nature, if it makes sense. It doesn't come naturally to be really overly bubbly and overflowing with praise.
I did want to talk a bit, although it's getting a bit dark, about when you were very angry and didn't talk. There's 1 week you didn't talk at all. You were quite angry as a teenager, weren't you?
Yeah, I had a lot of...
For a long time.
Yeah, I think I was very unhappy.
Quite angry.
I didn't have any friends at that stage of my life, and I didn't know how to get friends, and I thought that I was not even worthy of having friends, because I didn't think that I had anything that people would like about me. And I guess I was sort of...
Well, it was again because we had children very young, so none of our friends were your age. Although you did have some friends.
Yeah, I did have friends. I had friends before that, and I had friends after. I think at that stage I'd sort of just fallen out with some of my friend group, and they weren't really the sort of people I wanted to be friends with, and I didn't think they didn't really like me anymore, and that was difficult just because I was just very, very lonely. And although I'm very good friends with my brothers now, they were not really they were teenage boys. They didn't really want to be playing with their little sister.
Own thing, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
They didn't have any friends who were girls.
No, and they weren't really awful to me or anything.
Till they went to university.
I think being lonely I don't know if I'm particularly prone to it, but I feel like the times of my life when I've been happiest is when I've had someone. Being married has made me just my mood. Having someone always there has been just very something. Nice. It's like someone said it's like oxygen. Like you don't realize. Well, it's the opposite of oxygen, I suppose. But when you don't realize how much you enjoy air until it's gone, right? And I guess maybe this is getting too personal for Women's Hour, but that's something that really helped, is just having someone I could see every day and talk to, who was interested in what I had to say, and who had things that were interesting to say for me. Yeah. It's helped a lot, and
I remember when I met your dad.
It only takes one person, even if they're just a friend, if they're not your husband or your love of your life, just to have someone who's a friend to you, who wants to see you. I think
who's on your side.
Yeah, I do think sometimes about what it would be like if I had a sister or someone who I could be really close with. In those days, maybe it would have made it easier, but that's nice. Neither here nor there, really.
Some sister at school, wouldn't you?
I think a lot of
sister.
It's not that uncommon for people to go through really difficulties in teenage. I never self-harmed or tried to commit suicide. That sort of thing is really so common just at my school. Girls who are very similar to me, they everyone gets it in a different way. This sort of this dark time.
Horrible.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is that makes it so horrible. I don't know if it's just intrinsically has to be that way, or if there's something about the school system, or about is there something that can be done? I don't know.
When you go to secondary school, you realise that your parents are not normal. I mean, everyone realises this. Because you kind of take your norms from your parents, and then you go and you take your norms from somewhere else, and then you want to be somewhere else, really, I think. You want to explore.
On the internet for just some light entertainment. That so much of people get used to watching TV. They just put on the TV and leave it on.
Yes. Well, that's true.
And I think there's a kind of gap in the market for people who like to do that, but who are no longer interested, or they no longer agree with what they're seeing on TV. They'd rather not have that on, and then they just want some other form. They want their light entertainment to come from somewhere else.
Because having said that, there were always these magazines lying around the place. There was Good Housekeeping, how to do up your house. There was Woman's Own, which was very much, they'd always have a short story at the back, and I don't know what they were about really. I really couldn't tell you. There was often dresses there. And I did read that stuff as well. I read all the light stuff as well.
Well, I find that
stuff
for it. Really interesting.
Everyone did.
Yeah, I think these days a lot of what you get is basically it's a philosophy of how you should live your life in terms of your moral system, but it also goes for things like fashion, decoration, things like that, where the advice is just express yourself. Like, whatever you want to do that. That's the best thing you can do. And really, that's not any advice at all, in my opinion. It's something, not to be too judgmental and to beat people over the head with a big list of rules of when to wear white, or what's the right way to do things. But in the middle ground, I think, is a sort of way of going, well, you could do that, but also I don't think no one else is going to think that looks good, I'm afraid.
Well, they do say appearances are very important, aren't they?
Did you want to
judge you on appearances?
Did you want to talk about the spat you got into with the local mummy group about the dreadlocks?
Oh, the dreadlocks. Oh, yes, I did get into a spat with the mummy group.
I don't know if I've ever had so much respect for you as when you stood up to the woman with dreadlocks.
Well, there is this mummies group, isn't there? With,
don't name it.
No, I won't. But it's a very good network. I mean, you can ask them anything.
Yeah.
And especially for domestic violence and things, they give each other advice.
I read it every day. I love the mummies.
Yeah.
That's what I want Women's Hour to be. But there was a lady on there who was asking whether she should get her hair done into dreadlocks.
Yes.
And she wasn't like a teenage girl. This is a group only for mummies. And she turned out, I think she was like a 50-year-old lady.
Yes. She said, shall I get this done?
She's done everything in life, and now she's got to 50 and she wants to try out having dreadlocks. And
being covered in tattoos.
Yes.
So I said, don't do it. And I said, you have to be careful what singles you send out. Because I was saying people judge by appearances.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, this gives out the appearance, So then they were getting,
signals? How dare you?
That's right. What sort of signals are you implying? So then I said,
Bob Marley.
Marcus Garvey. So they go, Marcus Garvey never had dreadlocks. I was just, that was the ideology I was implying. I never said he did have dreadlocks. And then I said people who were angry with their mum. And I do think, people's hair is often just to annoy their mother. But then I started thinking my hair is white. And I've got both my parents. And when I was getting styled the other day for a wedding, someone else was paying, I was saying to them, both my parents really hate my white hair, and I was like going, I'm really annoying my parents at the age of 58. They do. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe it's the Christian thing. I ought to sort my hair out. Well, I love it. I love having white hair.
Well, you never criticised my hair, except for when it was too knotty, so I never got that complex about having my hair a certain way. I've never given you a single thought when styling my hair.
There was the moment when I chopped it off. That was the worst moment of your life, wasn't it?
Only because you think that you're the most important thing in my life.
Well, you did change that moment to a grumpy little, I don't know.
Well, not correct, but there's a lot of things that go on in my life that have nothing to do with you.
Oh, right. Well, good. That's a great relief to hear.
I think that's I think people beat themselves up about.
Well, you weren't very angry about it. It was only when I apologised to you that we got to be friends again. Really,
I don't even remember that.
Well, I was. You don't remember it. Well, I did because I was. I did have mental health problems, so I was manic one day.
Mm-hmm.
And in being manic, I realised that I had to really, really, really apologise to you for your hair.
Yeah.
And then after that, our relationship got much better. I thought, for chopping off your hair when you were 3.
Well, I'm glad that you had that idea, but I never actually, since I was 3, I didn't care about that at all.
3-year-olds don't always know what's going on in their own heads, do they?
Yeah, but I think as soon as my hair grew back, I'd pretty much forgiven it at that point.
Yeah, well, that's good.
While it was short.
You did say your hair was your best thing, which I think I mean, there are many good things about you, but your hair is one of your best things. It's so beautiful.
It's not so much anymore. It's a bit more dull than platinum blonde like it used to be. No, it's fine. I don't mind my hair, but you don't have to fear about me getting dreadlocks. Is all I'm saying. I don't. I don't wish to please you or to annoy you with my hair.
I'm glad you went with dreadlocks. I would be very annoyed. That's what I said to the mummies group. I'd be very annoyed if you got dreadlocks.
Well,
That's
you too.
the other thing. I do always tend to say what I think.
Yeah.
More than I probably ought.
Well, that's what I liked about it. Is when it's something that I'm doing or that influences me, it's quite an annoying trait to have in your mother. But when it's someone else who's getting told off, in my opinion, rightfully, it suddenly becomes a massive virtue.
I wasn't telling her off. Well, she wanted feedback, and she
I know.
She accepted it herself. She said,
But
"Thank
you were
you."
telling
I asked for feedback.
No, you're right. You were not telling her off. You were telling off the people who were trying to tell you off, and that is what I respect. When people go like, "Oh, how dare you moralize?" and you go, "I am moralizing, and now I'm moralizing at you as well." And that's Women's Hour. Yeah, I like that women's group, the mummies group. That's a wellspring that never dries up of entertainment for me on every level of observation and genuine curiosity. Lots of good information there. I think that at some point in my life I wanted to distance myself from things that were feminine, because I thought that, what is femininity anyway? It's just sort of invented.
Yes.
It's not really real.
That's quite Women's Hour and German
Judith
Greer.
Butler.
And I was only 35 before I ever wore anything pink. And then I
Yeah.
thought, and it became my corporate colour actually at the place where I worked. One had a corporate colour of purple, one had a corporate colour of pink, because it was run by women. And then I thought, yeah, pink, go with it.
Yeah, pink.
Pink's a great colour.
Yeah. No, I absolutely. I think I started feeling a lot happier once I started, incorporating
Yes.
the feminine things that I liked. You don't have to do everything.
Yeah, I agree.
I still don't wear makeup or
I think
earrings,
so
but
too.
once I was free to indulge in a bit of chit chat about the Met Gala, and it doesn't really matter if people tune in or not. I just sort of and I want to talk about dresses for an hour.
Yeah, I did learn a lot. I don't think I even knew what the Met Gala was, so it was
Well, there
very
you go.
informative.
Yeah. Not that I know anything about dresses,
Something
but
we need to know.
certainly
now,
got
if
opinions.
I go to New York,
yeah, you can
and
go to
since
the.
you bought me an opera ticket, now I know all
Yeah.
about the opera.
Well, maybe I'll go myself one day.
Yeah,
I secretly.
go together.
My first idea was that we could go together, but I thought that's not really a present if you buy someone opera tickets for yourself to go with them.
That'd be lovely.
Well, we'll go.
The three of us, the four of us, the six of us.
It really adds up when you have 6 people going. I tell you what.
We have to buy our own tickets.
All right.
Save up a year.
All right, we've lost our light. I think we're probably just the audience probably just looking at a black screen now. It is a good camera though. I think it might be all right. Thank you very much for joining me on Women's Hour. Thank you everyone watching who made it to the end. You're the truest fans there are. And leave your comments, leave a like. Tune in next week, Fridays at 9. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Bye bye.